You mean, JJ well, we've obviously all worked together, in terms of intangibles of a coach, knowing him, you've played against him, but also seeing what he's like, just as a, someone running a business, somebody running a show, everything like that. And we talked about it a little bit, and you talked about it with him a little bit, obviously, but when you knew this was a thing that was a possibility, your thoughts about him, even before these guys started?
Yeah, I think so many of the things that made him a great player, and in many ways an overachieving player, and I say that like in an endearing way. I think we all are strive to be like overachievers of what
he would
we're
say that, yeah,
capable of. All those things that made him that as a player translate seamlessly to any profession, whether that's podcasting, whether that's showing up every day and debating Stephen A. Smith, or that's trying to get the Lakers into a top 5 defense. Like, so much of that stuff translates just from, all right, there's an opportunity here. How do I maximize it? And turning over stones, finding ways, resources to get there, to get to that point. He's a maniacal worker, which I think cuts across so many different industries. And I think you see how competitive he is. I think you obviously see it in a much different way than
I see it.
Than we see it. Tommy, you probably have some very good insight into that.
I've seen it.
But when I see him like snapping clipboards and stuff and going to that level, I think he's now found a way, and you would maybe be able to speak to this, but to harness that into positive energy.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's still learning in that aspect because he's such a competitor. And I personally couldn't do it as a coach. Like, I would spaz out every chance I get. And you see situations where he's about to, and he reels it back because he knows everything isn't going to be perfect. Like, he always just says, as long as we're competing our ass off, then he can live with any result. But it's just when we aren't competing as hard as we should, then that's what really, really bothers him.
I was going to ask you this. I mean, one of his favorite words is sicko. You use it all the time on the show and in private. And I think part of why, you guys are so similar is you both are wired that way. And like we were saying before, in a lot of similar interests, but then also in different places as well. How are you learning to harness this energy yourself, both with him, but just in general, in terms of your natural competitiveness and your natural spirit versus like as a teammate? You can't always spaz.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. Like I said, with him, like, you want everything to be perfect, but you're never going to go through a full game, practice anything where everything is perfect. That would be nice, but in situations, you just kind of got to read the room. You got to be able to understand. And I think that's where the real relationship stuff comes in with not just like the coaches, the players. There's certain people that you can talk to in a different way than you talk to others. So I think it's, really good to, learn your teammates and learn how to, communicate with them, if it's one-on-one or if it's addressing them in front of the group, whatever way, gets to them, better. Cause there's some guys that you don't need to address in front of the group. And there's some guys that you can say whatever you want to them in front of the group, and they'll take it a different way. So it's really just about, having those relationships with the guys to be able to do that.
I'm actually curious your perspective with Spo, who have played for with USA as well. I think pretty universally considered, one of the best and most respected coaches around. When you're looking at like the intangibles of a good coach, obviously they're all different in their own ways, but what do you think they all have in common?
What do they all have in common? I mean, I can only speak to my NBA experience of having played for Spo, which is obviously a luxury, having played in one spot for one coach, especially when you see like the current climate of how coaches are treated in the NBA. There's just so much turnover. With Spo, I think the non-negotiable is the work ethic, the preparation. You have to have some level of that as a staff, as a leader, because ultimately that's what kind of bleeds down to your team. Is your team prepared? Is your team organized? And as Austin's saying, basketball is an imperfect game. You're never going to go through the course of 48 minutes and do everything, execute everything exactly right. But if it's done with intent, everyone's at least on the same page, and there's a will to compete, you're like stepping in the right direction. That's like non-negotiable. I think what Spo has really tried to capture with us, and when I've been on good teams and had good stretches, it's so much more than just like the X's and O's and execution. It's not like what set are we going to run, but more of like, how do you get everybody to buy into this? Like we're all super ambitious people that have our sights set on, getting accolades, making money, all these sorts of things. How do you get 12 individuals, 13 individuals, whatever it is, to buy into something bigger than themselves? And I think it becomes increasingly harder. Like high school basketball is one thing, right? Like there's no egos, no agents telling you this is that or whatever. But the higher you get up, the more challenging that becomes. So I think learning as a leader what buttons to push, that's where it really makes a difference. And like you've been on stretches of teams where everything's coming together, things look right, and then all of a sudden something can change, and it cuts both ways, right? It can be like sometimes the games where we look the most disorganized and whatever, like we are so far away from being a good team, something flips and changes, and it's more often than not the basketball stuff. At least it has been my experience.
No, that's a fact. I think that's right though. The main thing for a coach is to get everybody to buy into the end goal, and that's winning. And I was with Spo for 2 months with the USA stuff. I could tell he's very intense as well. Every scout he has, he had his paper rolled up in his hand, kept hitting his hand, yelling. I enjoyed my time with him.
No, he's great. And he's found a way. I think also when you've been doing it for so long, you learn different groups require different sort of tactics. And I think that's like one reason why JJ is going to be such a good coach in time is because he's not going to relent. Like he's always going to try to find, all right, this isn't working. Like we're pivoting, we're playing, we're going to figure out what's next.